All statements and opinions expressed by guests of this podcast are not representative of the Orthochat, its host, or its producers, and should not be associated with the podcast unless explicitly stated by the host.
You are listening to the Orthochat by Yanni Katsadas.
Απολύασος μισή ο θείος μου Υιός, σιγαρκατάκησε όλος τη αμαρτία και παρεδόθης τελείως τη ραφημία της εξαναστήσης σε κείμενο.
Κύριε Ιησού Χριστέ ελέησομε, 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 Κύριε Ιησού Χριστέ ελέησοme, Κύριε Ιησού Χριστέ ελέησομε, 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 Κύριε Ιησού Χριστέ ελέησομε. Hi, Yanni. How's it going?
What's going on, Father Palis, and what's going on, everyone? This is episode 1 of the Orthochat, and today we have a very special guest, Father Theodosios Palis, and I've known him for a while now, and he's a fantastic priest, and I think it's kind of funny how today is the day of commemoration for Saint Gregory the Theologian. I feel like that's appropriate for what we're trying to pull off here. And, thematically, this podcast through and through is not going to be about heavy or divisive topics or polemics, but it's kind of an armchair thing where we sit back and, we look into the lives of the people that serve us the most, which is our priests, who sometimes don't have the voice that they deserve in the public space. So, Father Theodosi, first of all, how was the service this morning?
Glory to God. It's always a joy to do liturgy, and Saint Gregory the Theologian is a special saint and one of our beloved saints. It was a beautiful liturgy. Thank God.
I'm happy. I'm happy that I went well. I was busy, so I didn't make it, of course. But, I always have excuses, and they're usually not good enough to make up for the reason why I wasn't in the service. But you know what? That was mine for today. And
next year.
next year,
If God gives
next
us
year,
it. Right?
of course. So, how old are you now? You're what, 30?
No, I have to think. 30, 32.
32.
I turned 33 this. I turned 33 this year. So
well, you don't look a day over 28. So glory to God for that. So, the first thing I wanted to talk about is, would you agree with me in saying that the world you grew up in is drastically different from the world we live in today?
yeah, I would agree with you. And the funny thing is, I don't know many people that like grow up, and especially if you're a priest, you don't usually get a job in your hometown, but that's where I have a job. I grew up in Aliquippa, where I'm here at Kimisis Tis Theotokou Greek Orthodox Church, and my father was the priest. Father Nicholas Palis was the priest here for 12 years. So I grew up in Aliquippa, and it was a rough school district, so much so that my mother said, "We're going to homeschool you guys," and we were homeschooled. And so now, 20 years later, I come back as the priest here, and so it's beautiful and interesting to see all the changes that are taking place. And when I was a kid, I would go outside and play and run around and come in when I wanted to, which wasn't always to my parents' pleasure. But nowadays, it's very different. I don't know if I'm just more of a warrior than my parents were, but we're very careful with our children and who we allow them around and where we allow them, and so I would think it's very different. It's a scarier world.
Yeah, and I talk to a lot of people who are kind of on the other side of things that say, maybe without the correct historical optics, who kind of say, oh, well, the world was always the same, but now everyone's just noticing it, or now things are measured and calculated. So, but it's right before our eyes that things have become, in the nicest way I could say it, maybe more unpredictable and more loose, and people don't fear God in the same way. And my first question to you would be, you know, considering the world you grew up in and the spiritual struggles that you and your peers went through, what problems do you see now in the youth, and then just in people in general, as a priest serving people, and how are they different from what you might have experienced people's spiritual struggles to be back when you were growing up?
Hmm. That's a difficult question. I think right off the bat, one of the things that I've seen change a lot and that I've observed is toughness versus sensitivity. It seems like nowadays everyone is sensitive. And when I grew up, there were some tough characters. It didn't matter what you said or what you did to them, it just rolled right off. Nowadays, I have trouble finding people like that have a toughness of character. And it doesn't have to mean like they're mean or ornery or anything like that,
Yeah.
but that they were able to roll with the punches and not be disturbed. Um, that's
And
one of the things, the changes I've seen. And yeah, it depends. It varies from like city to city and country to country. And my experience is just one person's experience and what I've seen. And but I think nowadays we don't remember God. We don't remember God. We forget about God. We forget about that He's right here. He's right next to us, that He's always watching, that He's always caring for us. And I think we sin more freely now. I think sin, obviously, in the past few years has been lifted up. It's been applauded and lauded. Evil is the devil tries to do whatever Christ does, a pale imitation. Christ inverts everything. The humble fishermen became the disciples and apostles. Well, the devil does the same. He tries to invert everything, and so the evil is exalted. And to be pure, to keep yourself pure, to live a holy life, is you're a fool, you're silly, you're crazy. That's what it seems like the general trend is.
yeah, and I tend to agree. I don't think there's anybody with two sets of eyes that would disagree with that statement, that sin flows more freely now than we've seen in the past couple generations. And things have progressively gotten worse. And there's a ton of things that people can blame it on. You could blame it on, I've heard some people say the Renaissance. I've heard some people say, the French philosophers coming over here and spreading their ideologies in the early 20th century. But I think it fundamentally comes down to people lacking that God-fearing upbringing in their lives. But something you just said really resonated with me, about how there were tougher characters back in the day who let things roll off their shoulders. And I think about that sometimes, how a sense of honor, how a trademark of virtue in somebody is having the patience with others just to let things roll off your shoulder that they do that may offend you, and giving them the same grace and mercy that we expect from God. I do feel like that's genuinely lacking now. And you probably deal with it a whole bunch because of the position you're in as a priest, where people are less charitable with you because of the times, and also because of your role that you play in their lives. Do you feel like that sometimes?
Sure. Sometimes, yeah, I feel like that. And, I have big shoes to fill. I really respect my father. I look up to him a lot. And my spiritual father, Father Mark Andrews, and my first spiritual father who passed away, Father Kostis, Father Nicodemos, Archimandrite Nicodemos. It was at my ordination to the priesthood. And, he had many people like attribute a lot of miracles to him, and he was a living saint. So,
Yeah.
the standard is here. Father Kostas would always say the priest is between God and man. He said there's no position higher than the priest, not a president, not a king, not anything. There's no one higher than the priest. And, at the same time, it's this here, but then Christ said, like, to Peter, if you don't let me wash your feet when Peter refused them, then you have no part of me. And then Peter's like, wash my whole body, wash my hands and my face too. And
No
so
kidding.
the priest has to, is a servant leadership, right? It's,
Hmm.
you lead by example. And so you're called to a very high standard. So sure, might get attacked or might get mud thrown at us or whatever, but, it's probably because of our own sins. And if it isn't, like, what do the saints say? Like, our greatest benefactors are the only ones who help us are the ones who attack us.
Yeah.
All the other people, they don't help us. They say nice things to us because they puff us up. So
I know exactly what you mean. And the priest being, I would think, the perfect archetype of that philosophical mold of the servant leader, where, they practice and keep account of their own humility before the one they're subject to, who is Christ, while being the shepherd of a flock. It works out really well when it's done right, when everyone kind of plays their part in the program, for lack of a better term. And I'm happy you brought up your father, who we're going to talk about in a minute, but something else that I wanted to talk about with you, because you're special in a lot of ways. Not only do you have a father for a priest and other family members that are priests, but just like me, you're Greek. So something that I've noticed in my life as a Greek Orthodox Christian is people returning to their faith later in life and having this spiritual revitalization, I guess. So what I want to ask is, as a priest, what is your experience of recatechizing lifelong Orthodox Christian who may have only been Orthodox in name and only recently got serious about their faith? And how is it different from bringing in actual catechumens into the church who are learning about Orthodoxy for the first time and willing to dedicate themselves to it for the first time in their lives?
It's a good question. It's also give me ahead of time for talking so much, but I remember as a kid asking my dad, like, who are these people that are coming to church now? And he would explain that there's a trend that he'd seen, years ago when I was a kid, that people who live in a country of luxury, like America, where we're first class, or where we live a very high life. We live as kings did in other countries. We live a very posh life, and so we forget God, and we place our trust in everything else, in our comfort and everything else, and not in the Lord. And so a lot of people, they'll grow up in the church, maybe participating fully, maybe nominally, maybe just doing because their parents forced them. They'll reach a certain age and they'll be like, I have better things to do. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to do all these other things. And they'll leave the church. And then they'll come back usually when they get married and have kids, because they're not just thinking about themselves and what they want to do and better themselves and their life and their pleasure and all that. They're thinking about, oh, I got to take care of my kid. What's good for my kid? And then that selfless thinking, that taking care of someone else, leads them usually to come back to the church. So there's that kind of general trend, but there's also, I think there's, my own, I have family members who left the church when they were kids, teenagers, because they were Greek, but they didn't understand Greek, and they just felt like it was a social club. And maybe it was. I don't know the situation at that church, and they left, and they came back later, not when they had kids, but when their kids were teenagers. And they were looking around, trying to find somewhere to take their faith seriously. So if someone is raised with some of the traditions, like praying before you eat, putting your cross on, thanking God in every situation, asking forgiveness, preparing for the sacraments to receive them, then it's a little bit easier, but at the same time it's harder because you're not building from the ground up. Whereas someone who's coming to the faith, usually they might have read more books than you. They might have read all the church fathers. They might be really zealous and on fire, and they're like, hey, this matches what I'm reading in the gospel. This matches what the first 300 years of church fathers ratings said, and and they come in with all this zeal, and so there's a balance. And so it's good when you have a convert or a catechumen and a cradle born, as they're called, together, because then they can balance each other. The convert who has found the pearl of great price is excited about it and zealous for it and realize its worth. They bring all this zeal and fire, whereas a cradle born will might take it for granted. Like, oh, it's just what we do every Sunday. It might not understand the significance of the liturgy, of the mysteries of the life, and so they'll be inspired by the convert, and at the same time they'll temper the zeal of the convert with the praxis, with the lived out faith. What does it mean to live a holy life every day, not just on weekends, or not just when you're in church. So
I know exactly what you mean. And bringing up people that are first coming to the church and they are on fire, and they want to research and they want to partake in not only, and I don't make a hard distinction on this, but not only the dogmatic and theologically intellectual side of Orthodoxy, but also the spiritual side of Orthodoxy. I've met converts who have been Orthodox for only 5 or 6 years, who have read triple the books that I've read. And I would like to consider myself knowing at least a little bit about the Orthodox faith, but I've had my entire life to fill myself with such things, and it doesn't put me to shame, but it humbles me in a way, knowing that there's people that have the kind of zeal that I should have been having my entire life in such a short period of time. And going back to what you said in the beginning about how people lose their faith, not necessarily lose their faith, but kind of wane from it and becomes dormant within them. And then, once they have kids, make a return to the parish and make a return to church. I think that feeds into this greater concept to where the royal path is, it's a cumulative thing. And, Christ surprises us because he's inescapable in that way, to where, I think it'd be fair to say in our church that we believe that, the situations we put ourselves in can be salvific in ways that we don't know. And, I think me and you have talked about this before, about how children can be the salvation of the parents and vice versa.
Sure. Right, from scripture. That's what St. Paul says, right? A woman is saved through her childbearing, and I hope he means the father too.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. For my sake, of course. I mean, I need it more than anybody, but it's like, there's a whole bunch of ways where, we can return to the royal path, where it's like, St. Paul says it's better to marry than to burn when in concern to battling the demons of lust. And, maybe children reignite the zeal of the faith within people who didn't have it prior to having children. These little things that Christ introduces into our lives that shift the paradigm of who we are, return us to him in a way that we didn't know we needed, which is something really special.
Right.
So,
and it's a beautiful thing, and it's also a sad thing too, because I mean, the goal is not that people should leave the faith and come back to it and catch on fire, but that they should be on fire, that they should be in love from now and not from some later point. I remember a great analogy that Stephen Christoforou gave, who did the Be the Bee episodes on YouTube, and he gave the example of football as the ritual of the American family. And he spoke how the father, he's the head of the family, he leads in the ritual. And so Sunday football, you'll get the popcorn, you'll have to put the TV on.
And there's like a whole thing involved with it.
There's a whole thing involved. And then when kids go off to school, if you're a Steelers fan in Eagles territory, you don't convert to Eagleism. you stay a Steelers fan. It makes you a more Steelers fan. And so it's this idea that, that's the loyalty and love we would have for a sports team. What about for Christ? What about for truth? What about for the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church? And so it's this, this is what we want, is to, the possibility of having children means that there's possibility for those kids to be saints. That's the goal, right? Is to raise saints. To do that, the saints, Saint Paisios, Saint Porphyrios, you have to be a saint to raise a
Hmm.
saint. So, yeah, it's beautiful when people come back, but it's also there's lost time that needs to be made up for. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, and bringing up the topic of family, and this is going to be kind of generalized, and it's a little hard to kind of compact the answer to this, I'm sure for you, but tell us how being the son of a priest, and a priest who I couldn't even begin to list off his accomplishments and accolades. How has being the son of a priest prepared you for the priesthood?
Well, it's a joke, I should say. At first, it really made me want to not be a priest. Not because of his example or anything. That inspired me. That was a great inspiration to me and still is.
Yeah.
But just seeing what his family goes through, um, the the isolation, the separation. Your wife is always your presbytera is always a single mom in church. Like
Hmm.
that's kind of sad.
Yeah.
You need a father figure and a healthy family dynamic, and that's it's so important. And so, um, my spiritual father, Father Mark, always tells me your family is your first parish, and so you have to take care of your family first. And so, my father, his example of as a loving priest who put Christ before everything and put others before himself, really inspired me. And from a young age, I wanted to serve in some way. At first, I wanted to be a cop, and then I wanted to be a paramedic.
A
And I wanted to be
cop.
yeah,
No
I wanted to
kidding.
uphold serve and protect. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um, and I was only like 13 or 14, and I was talking to my father throughout all these periods, and after a cop, a paramedic, that was where the action was, and having no idea the real trauma that these amazing people deal with, and then a doctor, and then I was like, well, the body's gonna die anyways, but the soul's immortal, so I want to be a doctor of souls, and then I wanted to be a monk, and
Oh,
and
well,
then Father, it's a long
look
story,
how
but
look how that turned out.
yeah, well, man plans and God laughs, right?
Hmm. When I
So.
when I was younger, I wanted to be an entomologist, and then I wanted to work for the CIA, and then I figured, oh well, that's probably not the best idea. And then I didn't really get my calling for the priesthood until I was about 14 or 15, and then it kind of wavered around for a little bit, and then when Christ has this funny thing he does where when you don't get the point with the tickle of a feather, he throws a hammer at you metaphorically, and he's very good at getting the point across. When you pray enough, he lets you know exactly the role you're supposed to take in life if you're up to the task, right? And destinies shift as we develop, and plans change, but God always has the path in front of you to be saintly and be in service to his people at any point in our lives. So, and
Exactly.
what else is funny is that I've met a lot of priests that always come from that are either interested in or have come from martial backgrounds, or not even martial, just very structured. Like even Elder Paisios, who's the Yerunda in Arizona, he was a pilot prior to becoming a priest, and that's, I mean, take it from me, that's not easy work. It's very structured and it's very organized, and you really have to have your head in the game 24/7 to make something like that work. So, I guess a common trend I see amongst, people in the clergy in general, this includes monks and bishops as well, that they always tend to come from backgrounds that require a high degree of order and uh a very particular skill set that takes a lot out of the person. Do you see any significance in that?
I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think of all my friends in seminary and trying to remember all their backgrounds.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the priesthood is a very demanding job, especially we're not here in America. We're not like just serving liturgies. As much as we would love to just serve liturgies and do confessions and house blessings and prayers for the sick and do that kind of stuff, we're doing all kinds of other stuff. We're administrators and we're program coordinators and event runners and secretaries, and the list goes on. We do like 50 different jobs.
I know exactly what you mean.
So
I
yeah,
mean my first parish priest was my first parish priest was a prison psychologist prior to becoming a priest, and then another one I know was in the Marines, and another one I know was in the Navy, or some variation of all that stuff. Just kind of ties into I guess the structure that is required from the priesthood. And I don't think it's a coincidence. I think God calls upon the kind of people that are ready to deal with the pressures that come with caring for people that need them in their darkest hours. So, back to your father, in light of his legacy as an internationally respected scholar and priest, he's what, translated and written dozens of
he's
books at this point, if I'm
translated over 100 books, but I think only maybe 10, 20 have been published. There's a lot of unedited or unpublished translations that we need to get to. And now that he's retired, maybe we'll have some more time for he'll have more time for doing that. I would love to see that, because his goal in translating, and he fell in love with translating as a young kid, I think even before he went to college, is because when he was growing up, there was no Orthodox books in English, and so he wanted to make them available to everyone.
it was
And so,
that bad early on. I didn't know there was such a
yeah, there was really no
deficiency of
Orthodox
them.
books. Yeah, even in seminary, the theology books, everything was in Greek. If you couldn't read Greek or understand Greek, then you weren't able to. You had to read Protestant theology books or something like that. Um, I know one priest confided, I won't say who, but he confided to another priest who confided to me that he had said, I really wish we had in my day what you have nowadays, because when I went to seminary, I couldn't read Greek theology books and understand them, and I learned my theology from Protestant theology books.
Yeah.
And that's sad. That's sad, especially if we're ministering, to the Orthodox and
Which
in
completely removes the influence of the lives of the saints from, the formal education.
right, and the Mother of God, and yeah,
Yeah. That's an issue.
yeah,
It's a
really,
major issue.
it really changes things. So yeah, we're very blessed nowadays to have all the English translations we have now, and so yeah, he loves translating. It's more than his hobby.
I believe I bothered him once or twice about certain books that I've, talked to people, and they're like, "Oh, could you translate this?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, my Greek ain't that great. So, let me get in touch with somebody who's a seasoned veteran in this field." And, I've hit him up for a couple of those, and I mean, he has a lot on his plate. I hope he continues his work, because, I've met people randomly that have said, that know me personally. Is like, "Hey, don't you know this guy that translated this?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah." And it's been like 4 or 5 people at this point. I'm like, he's really got a lot under his belt.
Yeah, yeah, he loves translating. He loves, putting out these beautiful resources. Like, for example, Ascetics in the World, Volume 1, Volume 2 came out a few months ago. And, this is beautiful, beautiful stories of saints, of holy people who lived in the world. Because a lot of times you think of a saint, you think of a martyr or a monastic. And while those are probably the majority of the saints, we do have saints that lived holy lives in the world, and we need their examples and inspirations. So it's really, really awesome stuff, and I think there's more volumes coming out of that series.
I'm excited. I will definitely be picking those up, and I will mix them into my massive library of things that I keep telling myself I'm going to read, but don't get around to, because my laziness extends into multiple facets of my life. But you know what? We're gonna crack down on those sooner or later. Um, so I feel like a common theme that we've been rotating around in this conversation has been about family. So kind of going back to what we were talking about before, being the head of a small family, how has your wife and your children strengthened your ability to be a good priest?
Yeah, well, without my wife, I wouldn't be here. I probably be in a monastery if that was God's will. But
Yeah.
yeah, the priest has to rely on Christ. And one of the blessings for married clergy that God has given them are their family. Um, like Father Mark would tell me, my family is my first parish. And so how I treat my first parish is so important because if I neglect my wife and I neglect my children, but then I'm running around taking care of other people, I'm neglecting my first parish. And these are my first parishioners,
Right.
they were my parishioners before I had any other parishioners.
I know
And
exactly what
so
you mean.
if you can take care of your family, and then you can take care of your parishioners and everything else. And so having the family, and it's not easy because a priest is on call 24/7.
Hmm.
And I try to be structured and have Monday be my family day. This is not my off day because it was off when I was single,
But you
But
have to partition time for them because I mean, as a priest, you're also a
yeah,
husband and a father, so that makes a lot of
exactly.
sense.
Exactly. So Monday is my family day, and I try to not be around my phone unless someone dies. Then
Oh,
obviously
God forbid, but
death
it
death
happens.
takes over. Yeah, death takes over. So, um, but yeah, Presidera is such a great blessing and aid. She helps me. She gives me feedback. She helps me rate my sermons. She,
Hmm.
we talk. We struggle together spiritually. We pray together. We suffer together. We rejoice together. And so, in all these things, and we raise the children together, and the children too. They humble us. We see our passions come out in them, and we're like, "Dear Lord, what happened? What did I do here?" um,
I mean,
they,
you rub off on them for better or for worse, and that goes for everybody. So,
right, right. So yeah, our the family is a big blessing. It's also a trial, it's a humbling too, especially
right.
with when they're little kids. So um, I'm kind of speechless. There's so much to say about my family, about families in general. Um, it's a very blessed life, but it's a very difficult life,
I know what you
having
mean.
a father being a priest. So um,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know what you mean on that part, but I mean, I with
the there's the joke, right? What do they say? Son of the priest, grandson of the devil, or something like that. They say.
well, I mean, less than that, the whole PK thing. It's like,
Mhm.
but thank God you broke the mold because you didn't you didn't live up to that stereotype, thank God. And I'm not saying all priest kids are bad or not even most of them, but there's a reason that that idea kind of cropped up, at whatever point. But I mean, whatever the case may be, it's like you've had a great upbringing, and I know bring a great example to your children, and you lead your family faithfully as well as your parish. So um, but you're also a young priest, relatively compared to, a lot of the people who say, oh, well, I know this priest and, he's been in the game for, 15, 20 years, or, oh, I know this priest. And it's like some 86-year-old retired hermit who's, which is a good thing, but, since you're young, you're more relatable to young people, and that's just kind of how the world works. So, I wanted to ask, as a young priest, what special connection might you feel to young people who come to you for help that are struggling with things that might be familiar to you because of your age?
So um, I'm I remember my Goya years, my teenage years, as not too far away. So I remember those struggles, and I youth, activities and all things youth related. I love my kids, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But I love doing stuff with the youth. I wish we did more with the youth. And so there's struggles, all the passions, most of them start, at a young age, and even the ones that people struggle with for years, they start in the teenage years or earlier than that. And so it's a lot better if you can nip something in the bud versus letting it grow and then really struggling it takes a lot, sweat, blood, and tears. And It really does. It really does to uproot a passion. You have to hate the sin. You have to love God more than that. And these things, they're like thorns around our heart, and they're suffocating us. And so, um, yeah, I mean, I still have my passions that I'm struggling with. Uh, that I pray that the obedience to my spiritual father and my desire to love God more than sin, wins. And so I feel greatly for the people who are struggling with passions, especially kids, because they have a very good opportunity now to like take it seriously and see the repercussions of what sin does and what sin is, and how to fight it. How to fight it through the teachings of the saints, the spiritual warfare. And that's, I think, one of the most beautiful things about Orthodox Christianity is that there's a path out of sin. There's a path out of sin. I remember going out to eat with some young adults at the previous church I was at in Lancaster, at Annunciation Greek Orthodox Church in Lancaster, and Isaac Lampart, one of my dear friends, asked them, and they'd come from various different backgrounds, Christian backgrounds and otherwise. He said, "What was the path of healing if you were struggling from a passion, from a sin that had formed a habit?" And they said, "Well, we were told you got to try harder, and you obviously don't love God enough." And that was it. That was the advice. And so, there's no prayer to the saints. There's no fasting. There's no asceticism. There's no frequent confession. There's no being benefited by the mysteries and sacraments. And like, that's one of the most beautiful things is the freeing of sin, the loosing of sin, untying of the bonds, and avoiding of it. So we're so blessed. We're so blessed. We don't even realize how blessed we are. What God has given us, all the tools we need to work out our salvation, to struggle to love God. So yeah, it brings me great joy when I see people doing that, and especially the youth. It's inspiring to me that, these youth, these kids are desiring the higher thing in life, desiring God.
Yeah, and that it resonates with me a lot when you said when you were talking about how one of the solutions to I guess stumbling consistently in the spiritual warfare is just a simple lack of love for God, and I guess the best way to put it would be lack of consistency, right? And it reminds me of the confessions that I had with Yeronda Paisios in Arizona, where I would go down there, and I've been down there ever since I was a little kid, pouring my heart out to him, all these things I've done, I have all these problems, I don't know what to do with myself. And he would just say in this very kind of casual voice, he would just tell me, how much are you praying? And then I would just look at him and be like, you know what, maybe not as much as I should. And he would just tell me, gotta pray more. That's all it comes down to. It's like you just have to be an active participant on the battlefield of unseen warfare. And
Yeah.
I think it's a powerful thing when that kind of clicks in people finally, when they look at themselves and say, I mean, it's just about putting the work in, and it's about working at our salvation. And then obviously that doesn't mean we get to heaven through our own merit. It's absolutely only through God's mercy and God's grace. But
We have to do our part.
yeah, we have to get our hands dirty. And it's something that I feel like is I feel like that's a topic that's mostly directed at others. Like, you hear a lot of people, you see that little demon of gossip get into people's ears where the people always say, oh, well, they're one of those families that think it's just good enough that they show up to church on Sunday. And they, that's another family that, you never see participating in the life of the church. Well, what about you? Log in your own eye, right? Instead of the splinter in somebody else's. So
Right. And can I share two stories?
yeah,
The
absolutely, please.
first is one of the times I went down to St. Anthony's Monastery in Arizona, and I went with my brother and some friends from seminary, from school, and we got to see Yeronda Paisios and talk with him. And one of my friends was really excited to talk to Yeronda Paisios, and had all these big spiritual questions to ask him. I don't even remember any of them, but they were like these big questions, and he was so excited to like talk to this elder that he'd heard things about, and so he went in, and afterwards he came out and his head was kind of down, and I said, "Dear friend," I said, "how did it go?" And he said, "Well, he told me I need to pray and fast."
That's it, man. That's the bread and butter, isn't it?
It was so funny. Like I commiserated with him, but I also laughed a little too, because it's like we want to know all these high things. It's like, okay, well, let's do the little things in front of us. And even Christ says, "He who is faithful in small things will be faithful in great things." So we're not faithful in small things. How do you think we're going to be faithful in great things? Or like, it's this idea like, oh, if I was there, I would take a bullet, or I would do this, or I would do, well, it's like, well, you can't even do this little thing, do the little thing first, and then talk about all the big things you'll do.
Yeah.
And the second thing is from Saint Dorotheos of Gaza, the log in your own eye. He says that in interpreting Holy Scripture, that the log is not that your sins are so much more than the other person who has a sty. It's that the log is just the sin of judgment. It is so big, it's as big as a tree. And that's how dangerous it is to judge others. And that log is just alone the sin of judgment. And that's why we have to be very careful not to usurp God's role and go around judging other people. But, look inward. St. Paisios, when this young man wanted to fix the church, and there's all these problems with the church, he said, and I want to do this. Said, okay, you want to fix the church? Repent.
Yeah, work on yourself first. You are the part of the church that you could fix.
Exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, we tend to get carried away. We're excitable humans, but we need to do what's in front of us. What God has placed in front of us for our salvation.
Absolutely. And I think one of my favorite things about the Orthodox Church, amongst the rest of it, is just, the concept of access that's just there. I remember in a prior conversation me and you had, you were telling me about the spiritual warfare in whatever capacity it existed prior to the resurrection of Christ, and how, the Jews, really didn't have a lot of options where, yes, of course, God spoke directly towards them as if it was, face to face, or, I mean, comparably over the phone with somebody else. Like they heard him verbally, the pillar of fire leading the Jews through the desert, that God was speaking to them constantly and in a very verbal and temporal manner. But, as far as, defense against the demons, I think you told me something to the degree of, they had this, greater power over the world, and, that the devil was, had dominion over the world in a way that he doesn't anymore. And basically all the Jews could really do was animal sacrifice to as kind of their form of repentance of sins, and then just wait to die to go to a place of darkness and rest, separated from the grace of God because of the sin of Adam. So, we find ourselves in a very different position to even the holiest people of the Old Testament, save Elijah, who just went straight up and, hasn't died yet. But it's like, now we're in this position where, we have the writings of the saints. St. John Chrysostom talks about in his, in the introductory pages, to his commentary on the Gospel of Matthew, how, God used to speak to us, and, now we have the writings of the saints and the lives of the saints to take examples from, and we have scripture and the gospel, and, how nobody can be saved while, God is not talking directly to us. We have access to this greater knowledge, and nobody can, partake of the kingdom of heaven without taking from the example of all of this vast array of resources that we have to work out our salvation. So I think it's important. I think, like we said earlier, the path to salvation is a multifaceted thing where, it requires partaking of the sacraments. It requires, It requires, seeing your own faults and not judging your brothers. It requires delving into, the theological realities of the Orthodox Church and the spiritual advice of the saints. It's all these things combined that, Saint Paisios talks about how there's three steps of holiness, where there's the first stage where God imparts his grace generously upon you. And the second stage, he takes it away a little bit to strengthen your soul. And then the third stage is where, common temptation doesn't really do it for you anymore, and things get more intense, but you're wearing the armor of God 24/7, to where, only the deepest of passions affect you in a way that could cause you to fall. So, I hopefully, God willingly, we could all get to that third stage. So, talking, tell me.
No, there's so much you said that just resonated with me. And one of the things, short story is, I remember hearing Father Nicodemus give a sermon on the feast of Saint Paraskevi. They have a chapel there to Saint Paraskevi at the monastery, and he was saying, "You think it's hard now? You think it's hard now? It was much harder in Saint Paraskevi's time in Rome." And so, at the beginning we talked about how we've seen a shift in just our short lives of just things becoming less secure, and more dark and more wild and more crazy. And yet even now our times, they don't compare to maybe the Christians living in the early Roman times, and how it's not that salvation is easy, but that we have everything we need in front of us.
Yeah.
We have to take one step and God takes the 99 others,
no kidding.
Have to take a little bit, walk, and, just turn towards Christ and walk towards him and just take a little bit. And I think it's, what is it? It's not Father Seraphim Rose. It's Saint Herman of Alaska, who says, turn towards Christ, walk to him with all you have, even if by crawling, just go towards him a little bit,
mm-hmm.
And he'll take care of you, Yeah, we're so blessed in the Orthodox Church to have all that we have.
And so often we complain about even just taking that one step that, God will take the other 99 for. And a lot of the times, I feel like Orthodox Christians, and once again, I'm probably the worst at this than anybody, but, I feel like a lot of Orthodox Christians fall into this trap where they're like, oh, well, if I pray enough, if I fast enough, if I partake in the sacraments enough, I will instill the virtues within me. I will create love within myself. I'll discipline myself into humility. Even these things that are requirements for our salvation are gifts from God. Nothing good, everything good comes from God alone. So,
without me, you can do nothing.
Absolutely. So
St. Peter says we can't even repent without him.
My big thing is always to just tell people, if I want to hear your thoughts on this. If somebody's struggling to pray from the heart, if somebody's struggling to love their brother because of grievances, if somebody's battling certain temptations, it's probably a good idea to ask God in your prayers for humility, or to ask him for fervence in prayer, and to ask him for patience with others. All these things, all these things that are prerequisites to acquiring gifts from God are also gifts from God, funny enough. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And it's a joke. It's a joke in Orthodoxy to say, don't pray for humility because you'll get humbled, as if we're scared of humility or something like that. And but really, Saint Porphyrios, there's a story. It's a longer story, but he explains that everything is covered in God's mercy, and so you can pray for specific things. Lord Jesus, pray, enlighten my darkness, Saint Silouan, right? Enlighten my darkness, right?
Right.
Or is that Saint Gregory Palamas? I think it's Saint Gregory Palamas, not Saint Silouan. Sorry.
I'll do my stuff wrong that we're just getting the names right. That's okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Saint Gregory Palamas, Lord, enlighten my darkness, and you can pray for specific things, and you should every day, all day, ask the Lord to be with you. But know that everything is covered in the Jesus prayer. It's the most powerful prayer. Kyrie Jesu Christe eleison me.
Of
Lord
course.
Jesus Christ, have mercy. And so like it covers in his mercy, in asking God to give us mercy and trusting his providence. We know he's going to take care of us. We know that whatever we need, he's going to give it to us. We just have to do our part. And the other thing that I see a lot is a temptation is to be impatient. And, there's a famous story with St. Porphyrios and a guy who came to him who is struggling with homosexuality. And I'm sorry, with St. Paisios. And this guy came to him and he was really struggling. And St. Paisios, I'm sorry, kept asking him all these things. Can you go to church? Can you give money to the poor and to the church? Can you fast? Can you go to confession? Can you do all these, easy things, these basic things, these simple things? And the guy said, yeah, I can do that. And St. Paisios said to him, go and do that and God will take care of the rest. And he did that. And the story ends with after 2 years, the passion left him. This thing that, this thing
That's incredible.
left him. And so it's this idea of like 2 years, it's like that. But we just have to be patient, do our part and let God do his part,
Of course, Christ isn't a genie in the bottle. Things come at their appointed season. And I feel like that relates back to the Gospels where Christ says, my burden is easy and my yoke is light. We can lay our problems on him. And, I feel like that story applies to everybody. If anybody's struggling with a passion that perpetually terrorizes them, that doing what is within our ability is enough for God to come into our lives and take care of what we feel like we're out of control of. Christ also says in the Gospels how, don't worry about what you're going to eat or what you're going to wear. Don't worry about tomorrow. Focus on today. Live in the moment, looking up towards Christ and asking for mercy and asking for his providence to become manifest in our lives. It's such an important part of the Christian life where a lot of people don't want to hear it. It's not necessarily controversial, but it's definitely antithetical to the times we live in where, finance people, life coaches, they want plans, they want, structure, put out 5-10 years in advance. This goes back to the Gospels. This goes back to the saints. Don't worry about anything. Just don't worry about it. Do what you can. Do what is within your ability to please God through what you can control, and God will take care of what you can't. I often call it this, and forgive me if this sounds irreverent, but the perks of Christianity. There are things that we have that, I mean, frankly, people of other faiths don't. We have advantages in our lives, and I think the primary one being is we can live stresslessly by laying our problems upon Christ, who is, more powerful than, whatever anybody else worships. And concerning my life, at least, he's taken care of everything that I've laid upon his feet and washes them away as if they were nothing. So it's really beautiful.
Right. And not to say that like being organized is bad or planning is bad, but
not at all. Trust me, I need it.
Things are in God's hands. Like it's, like what's the Greek saying? Echio theos. God will provide. That's what my father says all the time. Echio theos. God will take care of it. God will take care of it. It's okay. And yeah, we're so blessed to have our faith.
Yeah, I agree. And talking about the saints and what they can teach us, tell us about the life of your favorite saint and what makes them special to you.
Oh, I have a lot of favorite saints, but one of my
It's hard to pick, huh?
It's hard to pick. One of my favorites is Saint Porphyrios of Kapsukalidia, who died in 1991.
Is this the one they wrote "Wounded by Love" about, or is this a different Saint Porphyrios? Okay.
Wounded by Love, and I had heard about Saint Porphyrios. Well, let me backtrack a little bit. So my father, when he was a child, when he was a teenager, he read that Saint Nicholas as an infant, did not nurse from his mother on Wednesday and Friday. And he was
I've heard
like,
that too, actually.
and he was like, this sounds a little bit, it sounds like someone took some liberties with the book. And,
Mm.
it just sounds hard to believe. And so he prayed to God. He said, Lord, if this is true, please allow me to meet people who did this as child, and please allow me to meet people like I'm reading about. And so that was his prayer as 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 a teenager, as a young adult, as an adult. And God answered his prayer, and he got to meet a lot of different people and a lot of holy people. He got to meet Saint Porphyrios of Kapsokkalivia, and he got, and so I had heard about Saint Porphyrios growing up, and he got to meet, Saint Paisios and all these other saints, and Father Epiphanios Theodoropoulos, who there's a book called Counsels for Life, I believe.
I think I have that one somewhere.
So that elder actually didn't nurse on Wednesdays and Fridays as an infant. And so he got to meet these people who did the same thing that St. Nicholas did 700 years ago. You know what I mean? And so I had heard about St. Porphyrios growing up and all these miracles and how holy he was and all this stuff. And when I was in college, a priest monk, Father Dimitri, gave me his book and with a thick Cretan accent said, read this. It is the fifth book of the gospel.
The fifth gospel, yes, I've heard that as well.
The Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and Wounded by Love.
Yes, and Saint Porphyrios.
So I read it, and he said, read one page a day. And I was like, oh, I'm a homeschooler. Come on, I was homeschooled pre-K through 12.
That's a walk in the park.
Walk in the park. Well, I read one page, and it was so rich and so beautiful and so deep that I had to stop and read that page 2-3 times. And so every day I'd read my one page a day. And that book changed my life. St. Porphyrios changed my life. He saved my soul in many ways and saved my relationship with many people. And it's just amazing, just amazing. I highly recommend, if you get anything out of this podcast, read Wounded by Love.
You know what? And I was going to ask you at the end of the podcast, what book, when I'm not doing the clerical interviews, I should be reading and giving my thoughts on in the intermediary episodes. And I think that's going to be the one that we go off of, just because, it's right there. If that's your favorite saint and the book is that beneficial, I think it'll be beneficial for people to hear it in audiobooks / my idiotic ramblings form. So I think that'll be beneficial. Yeah.
Just be prepared to struggle over what not to say, because there's so much. And I'll say one quote from the end of the book. It's on the chapter on the upbringing of children. I didn't have children. I was a college student when I read this, but it saved my relationship, and it taught me to be a little bit more gentle. It says that St. Porphyrios says that words fall like hammers on the ears, but prayer goes to the heart. Words fall like hammers on the ears, but prayer goes to the heart. And so it's this idea that, if you want to correct someone or change someone or fix someone or all these things we want to do to other people, stop trying to convince them, argue them, whatever. Pray for them. Pray, skip the ears, go right to the heart. You know what I mean? And in doing that, not only will that person be changed, but you yourself will be changed. And that's like the secret. And in throughout the book, St. Porphyrios, many times he goes, this is the secret. And then he'll say something amazing. And then later he goes, this is this Aftonito Mysterion, Yeah. And it's so beautiful. Yeah. So beautiful book, amazing saint. St. Porphyrios went to Mount Athos when he was 12. And God wanted him in the world, though. And his asceticism was extreme, and he got sick and was sent back into the world.
And he went back and forth, and because, he was concerned for his family, but eventually God, let him stay on the Holy Mountain after a period of time, right?
I think he spent most of his time in Athens at the polyclinic, at the hospital there, in the worst part of Athens, like the red light district, Omonia Square.
Yeah.
And
it ain't get much better there either, believe me.
I believe he was buried on Mount Athos. I don't remember where he ended his life. I believe it was in Greece. I'm not sure if it was.
I would think so. Yeah, and it's ironically enough, the death of the death of I guess Nectarios of Egina, led Saint Sava de Kalinos, and eventually baptizing my great grandparents and this whole thing. So it's funny how God lets the right people end up in the right places at the right time. Thank God.
Right. There's no coincidences. And like you
Ever.
talked about earlier about like a lot of good can come from something bad. And like one of the beautiful things about Orthodoxy, I wanted to say this earlier when we were talking about all the blessings and benefits, is the understanding that everything is a gift from God.
Yep.
That the blessings are blessings and the blessings are also blessings.
Mm-hmm.
The challenges, the struggles, that these things, just like scripture says, gold is purified by fire, tried by fire. And the same thing that happens to us. Like even God, like you talked about St. Paisius's, the stages where God draws away his grace to test us, to try us, to see, okay, what are we made of? And how much do we actually love him? And are we willing to struggle even if he's not, lifting us up, boosting us with grace?
Of course.
And so this understanding, this Orthodox mind frame that seeing everything is like, thank you, Lord, for this thing that you've given me, even though this is difficult, even though this is painful, even though this is challenging. Thank you, glorifying God in everything, right? That's what we're supposed to do, praying without ceasing. So,
I mean, can't argue with that. I mean, it's like I said, like we were talking about earlier, it's just putting in the footwork. It is taking up your sword and your shield and being an active participant against the passions and temptations that combat us, and God is with us through every step of the way. So, and talking about the spiritual life, especially in this generation where, not only are young people struggling in a very unique way, but at times I feel almost specifically targeted by the demons, since young people are the ones that are so specifically consumed and attracted to digital media and influence and new culture. What message do you have to young people trying to find their way through the unseen world who haven't come to Orthodoxy yet for whatever reason?
if you want it, God will give it to you. If you're seeking the truth, Christ said, "Knock, and the door shall be opened unto you. Seek, and you shall find. Ask, and you shall receive." If you truly desire for truth and for God, for Christ, then pursue that, and God will open the doors. You will see God will open the doors. Yeah, just know that God loves you, and he's trying his best at every moment to bring us to the truth. And most of the times we're like, leave me alone, bro. And we're pushing him away through our evil deeds, through our evil thoughts. So all it takes is one turn to Christ. And keep turning. We turn. Keep turning to Christ. So that's what I would say. That's what I would advise.
And I think that's an excellent message to leave off on. And once again, thank you so much for making the time to talk to me, and not only just me, but all of our listeners. I think that a lot of what we talked about will hopefully help people work out their salvation in ways that may have been right in front of them the whole time, because so much of what we experience in the church, it's not necessarily receiving new wisdom, but it's Christ lifting the veil over our eyes and removing the cataracts that stopped us from seeing the solutions that are right in front of us, which is always turning back to our duties as Orthodox Christians, and returning to a connection to Christ through a cleansed psyche, and through discipline, and through love for one another. So
yeah, thank you for doing this, and for having me on. Please, if you're hearing this, please pray for Father Theodosios the bum, and it's been a great
pray for Uncle John the bigger bum. Pray for Yanni the bigger bum. Trust me.
a great joy. Thank you. God bless you, and God willing, we'll talk soon, Yanni.
Yeah, don't worry. I'll give you a call soon. All right. Thank you, everyone. This has been episode 1 of the Orthochat, and I will talk to you guys very soon. Thank you.
και παρεδόθης τελείως στη ραθυμία της εξαναστήσης σε κείμενο.
Κύριε Ιησού Χριστέ ελέησον, 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 Κύριε Ιησού Χριστέ ελέησον.